Investigate calls Jeffrey Lacasse.
Jeffrey Lacasse, please.
There he is. Oh, Jeff, thank you for being here.
No, seriously, Jeff, I mean it. Thank you, Jeff.
My name is Jeffrey Lacasse, Jeffrey Lacasse.
Thank you, Jeff.
Well, you seem quite sincere. What's that music?
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Jeff. Charlie had told her that no man wants to date a single mom, so we had this conversation repeatedly. And then I show up to dinner and Charlie's dating a single mom. Thank you, Jeff. I'm so freaking scared of that T-Rex. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Jeff. An extremely contentious divorce. Thank you, Jeff. And Wendi Adelson drove me to Charlie Adelson's house, at which point I do recall observing that she was unusually jittery and being strange. I didn't know what to make of it at the time. Thank you, Jeff. She was a nervous wreck. And I actually traveled to the store to buy her, I believe, some Pepto-Bismol. She was such a nervous wreck, she was having stomach problems. So she wasn't food poisoned, she didn't have the flu, she wasn't sick. She was just so
I don't remember that.
nervous that she was having stomach problems. Thank you, thank you. Well, you didn't go anywhere with Wendy without hearing about
No.
Dan Markel.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you. I was kind of tired of being strung along. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, John from Jeff. Thank you, Jeff. You can bet that he has tons of sex. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Jeff. I'm so freaking grateful for my Jeff.
No further questions.
All right, we can release a witness. Okay, you're free to go. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. I'm so freaking grateful for my Jeff.
Wow. Very beautiful. Thank you. Thank you.
You've been great, really. I want to thank each and every one of you for coming by. Thank you, 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 I hate doing this. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you.
You are listening to the Roberta Glass True Crime Report, putting the true back in true crime. From New York City, Roberta Glass is now on the record. All right, how is everyone doing? I'm back just off the train, a little bit late, but here nonetheless. And I want to talk about Wendi Adelson. And did she set up Jeffrey Lacasse? But before I do, I want to thank the Society page for the intro, for having such an awesome YouTube channel. and not being bothered by the fact that I have used that "Thank you, Jeff" video as an intern. It's an intro more than once. I'd never get tired of it. But check out their page. Link is in the description of my video. Highly suggest you subscribe for all their awesome content. Very interesting comments. Before we start talking about Wendi Adelson and did she set up Jeffrey Lacasse to take the fall, to be the number one suspect? Because as you know, had he gone on like he had planned on his trip, it would have taken him right by Dan Markel's house. Right after the shooting, you would have just seen him speeding away from the scene of the crime. Instead, he left the night before. He had an ironclad alibi, and we will be talking about that right after we look at your comments. So, first one from Bell Gizmo 294. What I think is interesting is the detectives initially misspeaks and says, so he's talking about Craig, he or she is talking about Craig Isom, misspeaks and says, quote, "There's been a shooting at your house," unquote. And he corrects himself and says it was her old house on Trescott. You would think that as soon as he said there's been a shooting at your house, she would be like, oh my God, a shooting at my house? What happened? Instead, she waits because she knows what he's going to say. Thought that was very interesting. I never considered that part of the police interview. Everyone, of course, focuses on the fact that she immediately brings up the question, I was wondering if you thought I was a suspect in the car ride over. When how could she be even thinking about that yet? She hadn't been told, as far as we know, till she got to the police station. So it's a little bit odd. She jumps the gun a little bit on understanding why she would be considered a suspect. Iconoclast 6994 says, there is no doubt a tragic and compelling, this is no doubt, a tragic and compelling case. Yet it's Inquirer amazing. And I think this person means Inquirer magazine amazing. How laser focused and nitpicky folks are with how composed and meticulous Wendy is with language. Since when is meeting the legal law enforcement machine on their own terms tantamount to criminality? So I guess the comment means because Wendy answers the questions vaguely and is a lawyer and wants to protect herself and knows that, well, that doesn't indicate criminality. So I think we're supposed to all ignore our basic human instinct that there's something very wrong with a mother whose children the father of has just been fatally injured in a crime, in a shooting crime that in a neighborhood where it doesn't happen very often in Tallahassee, in his own driveway. She knows it happened at his home, that she should have no interest in helping solve the crime. And instead, she should shut down after spending 5 hours in the police station, and her whole entire family has lawyers contact the police department and say, we're not talking, we're not helping. We're not supposed to think anything's odd with that. Is 5 hours enough? Should she care more about herself than solving this crime? Is that, I don't know. I guess that's your position. It's just a little odd to me. John Jensen 6862 says, I really think Charlie is innocent. Wendy made the killer for hire deal with Catherine McBonowa when they met. Charlie has no motive at all besides loving his sister. But he is caught on tape. He's caught on videotape at the restaurant talking to Katie about it. He's caught on audio tape talking about it. And there's certainly a lot to implicate him. To believe he's innocent, you'd have to believe that Katie extorted him and the Latin Kings were okay with putting him on a payment plan. Didn't want his Ferrari, didn't want any of the other things that he had as a wealthy periodontist. They were just like, cool, you got $3,000. We're into long-term planning here. We're into solid financial planning here with an eye on the future. That's how the Latin Kings work. Whatever you can pay, we don't want to stress you out. And that's how it went down. And that's just the puzzle pieces fit together for you. John Jensen, 6'8", that works for you. And that there seems to be very few text messages between Katie and Wendy or communications. So you just think law enforcement didn't find those, or they had some other way of communicating? They communicated maybe by carrier pigeon. I don't know. Let me know what your argument exactly is. You just gave me like a little clip of it, just very odd. But another channel, Murder by Maestro, that of course is Craig_R's new name for his channel. And he's been putting up really interesting stuff. He's gotten me totally interested in the Andrea Snyderman, the murder of Rusty Snyderman case that happened. She went on trial, I think, 10 years ago. And it has a lot of parallels, as he's pointed out on his channel, between this case. But he made a great video, and I just want to show you talking about the car. So let's go back. Let's circle back to the beginning of this episode, the top of this episode, where I asked the question, did Wendi Adelson set up Jeffrey Lacasse? And to do so, and she would need a car, she would need the shooters to have a car very much like Jeffrey Lacasse's car. And of course, as we've seen on the Jibbers channel, every car resembled Jeffrey Lacasse's car. And to rent a car like that, and that's what Murder by Maestro looks at, to rent a car like that, you would have to request that color car. And the only way you could do that without it being noticed was you would have to know the rental agency, be familiar with the person that runs the lot, and ask on the down low. And I wonder what other plans there were for that car. Was it going to be sent? Was this Prius going to be sent to the crusher? I don't know, but let's take a look first at Murder by Maestro's video entitled Wendi Adelson versus Jeffrey Lacasse. I'll show you a little bit what he's talking about.
All right, so what did you do?
Well, then she needed to call me back, and it went from enthusiastic, her enthusiasm about seeing me, to let's just meet at yoga tonight, go in separate cars. So there was a real shift in about 30 minutes.
Did you go to yoga?
We did. We went to yoga.
Right. And after yoga, was there a discussion about your relationship and the status of your relationship?
Yeah, a very brief one. I mean, yoga is not a great place to talk, obviously. So while we were sitting there, she seemed very cold, and I kind of got the feeling that it was over, that this was it. So as we walked to the car, I tried to talk to her about the relationship, and that didn't go well. And so I just kind of put up my hands and walked away, feeling sad that this was it.
All right. And
So just an interesting thing about Jeffrey Lacasse, why I think Jeffrey Lacasse might have been picked as a patsy from the beginning is that if you know anything about Jeffrey Lacasse's background, he did not have the pedigree that the Adelson family was looking for, in my opinion. Now, my opinion on the Adelson family is that they're a family obsessed with status, winning, money, and getting even. Taking as much as they can get and giving as little as possible. So Jeffrey Lacasse comes from what sounds like a more working class background. He went into the military. From the military, he was able to put himself through school all the way up to getting a PhD in social work with scholarships. In my view, I think that would be very disappointing for Donna Adelson. Just having a professor. Of course, Dan Markel was this rising star, shooting star professor, genius professor, law professor, Harvard educated, Cambridge educated. And we know Donna and Wendy picked him out together on J-Date. So I don't think Jeffrey Lacasse was ever the caliber for the Adelson Institute. I mean, just think about naming your dental practice the Adelson Institute. It's an institution of dentistry. So I think they, even though Donna and Harvey seem to come from a more working class, middle class background, I think that they are in the elite. They think of themselves that way. That's just the way I see it.
as you walked away, was that the end, or was there more conversation after you began to walk away?
She called out to me, and I walked back towards her. And she was deeply curious. Well, let me back up slightly. During that conversation, she didn't have any interest in spending any time with me for the rest of the week. So it kind of confirmed, like, this is over. Mm-hmm. But then when she called me back, she had a series of detailed questions about what I would be doing on Friday.
And Friday is going to be July 18th, right?
Yes.
And that's the date of the homicide?
That's exactly right.
What were her inquiries of you regarding that date?
I had a trip planned to Tennessee. She was aware that I was planning to leave about 11 a.m. On Friday. I need to get to Atlanta for an early dinner, so with traffic, she knew I was departing at 11. And at the yoga studio in the parking lot, she had asked if I was still going. If I didn't go, why not? What route I would be taking. A lot of bizarre amount of interest in that trip that didn't make sense to me at the time, given that she didn't want to spend time with me.
And how does it make sense?
How believable is this now, looking at it now? Isn't it interesting that Donna said he was twitchy and red? She called him Lacoste on the stand, very close to Katie McBana was. De Lacoste, I believe, was one of her lawyers. So I find him an incredibly believable, relatable witness, easy to understand, easy to follow, trustworthy, about as good a witness as you're going to find. But isn't it interesting that he has kind of replaced Dan Markel with this passionate hatred? He's twitchy. He looks nervous. He looks untrustworthy. Only Donna, right? June was wonderful. Oh, she's so beautiful, that June. Oh, she looked beautiful, Charlie. Beautiful. She was beautiful on the stand. And when she said, I'm still in love with him, I thought, oh, put in a little beep there. Donna has a mouth on her. Really? Have you heard it? Unbelievable. And so does Charlie talking to his mother. You definitely couldn't say, do you talk to your mother with that mouth? Because he definitely does. June, she looked beautiful. She was so poised. Not like that Jeffrey Lacasse. He was so twitchy and red and twitchy. Who would, and he just got up there and lied and lied and lied, and they believed every word. They're so stupid in Tallahassee, right?
Sense to you now?
Well, if I had left on my trip at the scheduled time that she had known about for quite a while, I would have driven pretty close to Danny Markel's house about the same time as at the murder, in a similar looking car to the suspect vehicle.
What type of vehicle did you drive?
I drove a 2004 Nissan Sentra that was silver metallic gray color.
So if you had followed your original plans, you would have been passing by the Markel residence or nearby there around the same time as the killers were fleeing?
Yeah, I would have been at Capitol Circle in Thomasville. Sure, I would have been on the same cell tower, for example. I think my life could have been pretty complicated had I taken my original plans.
All right, so you didn't, I guess, take the original plans.
No, I did not. I had made a last minute decision the night before to leave Thursday night instead. I had not informed Ms. Adelson about that because we weren't speaking. Actually, no, I don't know that anyone, for sure that anyone in Tallahassee knew I had changed my plans, just the people at the other end.
All right, so you were actually in Tennessee at the time of the homicide.
I was.
And when you were, we've heard you were called in as a potential suspect, and apparently named by a Jane McPherson. Do you know who that is?
I do.
Okay, who is that?
That was a friend of Wendi Adelson's, and she was a doctoral student in our program. I had not much of a relationship with her, just a kind of a working relationship. We'd worked on a couple of projects together, but I didn't know her very well at all.
But someone that knew that you had been dating Wendy.
Yeah, I think she was a confidant of Wendi Adelson's. Yes, for sure.
Okay, so you get called in, and were you able to provide documentation to show that you were in Tennessee and not in Tallahassee?
Yeah, I was excluded fairly quickly because investigators found Kmart surveillance footage of me at a Kmart in Tennessee using my credit card with my cell phone showing me there shortly after the murder. So it was impossible that I was the shooter.
All right, and then was there also some similar type coincidences around the time of the trip that the killers made in June?
Yes. On June 6th, I had a business trip to Gainesville, and I departed at 11 a.m. on a Friday, June 6th, which Ms. Adelson would have known about by March. So really, I take 2 trips out of Tallahassee in my car the whole spring and summer semester. And both times, hitmen try to kill Danny Markel.
So Wendy had all the information, is what Murder for Maestro is pointing out. You can look at the kind of cars that were rented, and they all resemble slightly. And this is the guy that ran the car lot or the rental car place. So how could they guarantee that they would rent a certain car without it being remembered or written on the receipt? They would need a friendly garage, is what Murder by Maestro is saying.
Do you remember back in July 2014, approximately how many like Toyota Priuses you had?
Approximately 10.
Remember how many of them were greenish or silver?
2.
Did your company rent one of those Toyota Priuses to a Luis Rivera back in July of 2014?
Yes,
And is there a contract that documents that rental agreement between your company and Mr. Rivera?
yes,
I also want to ask you about this word brother with the phone number next to it at the top of the agreement. Do you recognize that handwriting?
yes,
How do you recognize it?
that's my handwriting.
Okay, and did you fill out this contract?
No,
You wrote the one indication, the 786-372-5986 number.
yes.
Do you recall why you wrote that on the agreement?
Yeah, as the owner of the company, I try to get any contact information for anyone that's renting the car, or maybe anyone that might be with the person renting the car, so that I have contact info.
So you have an alternative way to get in touch with the renter?
Yes,
Do you have independent recollection of why you wrote brother on this one?
no,
But it could have been someone with the person renting the vehicle, such as Luis Rivera.
yes, most
That-
likely.
Do you know the defendant in this case, Sigfredo Garcia?
I've met him before.
And that's through him renting vehicles at your company?
I don't recall if Sigfredo ever rented a vehicle, but just being there and a gentleman that used to work for me, they were friendly.
They may be hanging out near the business.
Yes,
At some point. Do you still own that Prius?
no,
What did you do with it?
I sold it.
To whom?
I don't recall who I sold it to.
Do you recall about when you sold it?
No,
Oh, he leaves us murdered by Maestro, leaving us on a cliffhanger. But isn't it interesting? He doesn't remember when he sold the car. Wouldn't you think it would be right after? He doesn't want to say right after Dan Markel was murdered. And and I always found it interesting that there were repairs and damages to the car. We know they shot a hole in the gas line and repaired it themselves, and there never seemed to be any talk of an extra charge. Or am I wrong about that? That's my recollection. And we know that Sigfredo Garcia and Luis Rivera referred to each other as brothers. They were close as brothers. And that's something that you'll see with streetwise people. They'll say my wife when they're not married. It's couples that live together will say my wife. It's just a shorthand. My brother when they're not related. My cousin. And isn't it convenient for the owner of the rental place to say it wasn't his close relationship with Sigfredo Garcia. It was his employee that no longer works there, which could be true. You could know two people there, but they were much closer. The close relationship wasn't between the owner of the lot and Sigfredo. Definitely not, right? Pretty interesting video. Okay, someone is saying, Wood Al is saying the shot through the gas line may have been the reason the car got sold. Yeah, you're thinking like a defense attorney. But before it got sold, why weren't they charged for damage to the car? Why was it never found out? I just find that odd. Whenever I've rented a car, they inspect it. And if anything like that, you have to put a deposit down in case anything like that happens. It's automatically charged. Even not cleaning it or not filling it with gas, you get an extra charge. So I'm going to take a quickie break. When I get back from the break, we're going to look at Jeffrey Lacasse's first testimony in Katie and Sigfredo's trial. Pretty interesting stuff. When we get back, don't go anywhere. If you are enjoying this episode of my True Crime Report, please hit the thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and share this episode. Get access to exclusive podcasts and other bonus content by becoming a patron today. If you have a question or comment for me, shoot me a super chat and I'll do my best to answer it and read it on air. Thanks so much. Now back to the show. Yeah, the whole car thing is odd. And I also wonder if Wendy if she had two people in mind, was it a choice between David Sack and Jeffrey Lacasse? But because it doesn't seem so, because she seemed to keep in touch with David Sack, the theater teacher, professor that moved. I think he's teaching theater. And he had more of the background, Ivy League educated type guy. So I would think that if he were really in the running to be the patsy, Jeffrey Lacasse was so perfect because A, he was so in love with her. That's according to his own statements. He was so easy to manipulate. And two, he was disposable. And that's he was one of the people that don't matter in life to the Adelson family. And that's a theme that runs through this case, is you can buy off the poor people to do your dirty work without ever having the finger pointed at you. And it looked like it was going to work for a while. Rumor has it that Meigs, the DA, back in the beginning of this case, was going to stop at Katie. So it would just be the poor people that were used to do this crime, paid off. They were all going to be punished. And the Adelson family was going to be home free. And we're still waiting to see where this story ends. Does it end with Donna? Isn't that going to be odd if that happens? So we're going to have to go all sort of accept this idea that Wendy did a lot of odd things, but she was just following her intuition. She was just coming to terms with a divorce. That's why she drove by the crime scene. That's why she bought Bullet bourbon. And I'd love to know more about this Stock the Bar party. If there were other friends who went, asked, because like I've said, the invitation seems so made up, either made up by someone following this case or made up by Wendy herself. And if I had to guess, I would guess the latter rather than the former, because it's so awkward. In the design of the invite, it says, bring Bullet bourbon. It doesn't say, Wendy, bring Bullet bourbon. It just says, bring Bullet bourbon or another kind of spirit. It's not exactly word for word. I'm just remembering from memory. But if that were the case, they'd end up with like 75 bottles of it. If there were, say, that was the guest list, 75 people, or maybe 70 bottles and 5 of something else. And what kind of Stock the Bar is that? Just really odd. Was the Stock the Bar party, was it a Stock the Bar party? What kind of party was it? Was that made up by the Adelson family? Let me know in the comments. just when they showed it on Deep Drive True Crime, I was like, this cannot be real. This reminds me of Donna's dialogue from inside the Leon County Jail. That's the fancy lady who murdered her son. We can't get, the fancy lady, we can't get, what is it? She has no rights. I think that's the dialogue. She has no rights. As she's arguing that the Leon County Jail has violated all her rights. I mean, it's just so poorly thought out. How would they say bring bullet bourbon? If they thought it out better, they would have a whole list of things you could bring. Grey Goose vodka, bullet bourbon, blah, blah, blah. And like I said before, if it were specific, it would say, Wendy, we're asking you specifically to bring this kind. So even Charlie, in his discussion with his mother, says, why was she buying bourbon? Women don't drink. I don't think he said women. I think he said girls or chicks or something demeaning and diminishing. Don't drink bourbon. And she had to buy that kind. What are the chances? And here's Donna going, it's crazy. It's crazy, Charlie. It's crazy. I know, but that's the truth. That's the truth. If you ever want to know where Charlie got the "that's the truth" refrain in his testimony, I think we can safely say it came right from Donna's brain. So here's Jeffrey Lacasse's testimony. And I just thought we could hang out and watch it together.
Be seated, please. Okay, next witness, Ms. Copeland.
State calls Jeffrey Lacasse.
If you'd face the clerk and be sworn, please, sir. Raise your right hand.
I do.
You may proceed.
Sir, please introduce yourself and spell your first and last name.
Yeah, I'm Jeffrey Lacasse, Jeffrey. Excuse me. Last name spelled Lacasse.
How are you employed, Mr. Lacasse?
I'm employed at Florida State University as an associate professor.
All right. What about back in 2014?
I was an assistant professor at Florida State University.
Right. And did you have a relationship with Wendi Adelson?
I did.
What type of relationship was that?
We started dating in the fall of 2013. She became my girlfriend around March of 2014.
Okay. And when did that relationship end?
July of 2014.
Okay. And when the breakup occurred, was there a big argument that occurred that precipitated the breakup?
We had a argument in late June. She went to South Florida for a couple of weeks, and when she came back, we tried to make things work, and it didn't really work. She sort of cut off contact.
All right. And during that argument when she went to South Florida, was she in South Florida on July 1st, 2014?
I believe she was. I dropped her off at her house on June 29th, I believe.
Okay. And during the course of your relationship with Ms. Adelson, did you ever meet her family?
I did.
Who did you meet?
I met her brother. We went to South Florida for an alternative spring break, went to a Immokalee, and I had dinner with her brother. And I met her mother at her house just very briefly, maybe 10, 15 minutes at dinner. And when I would pick her up and the kids were there with the grandparents, I would have just a couple moments interaction with them. I didn't have a lot of contact.
Okay. And what about?
So you can definitely see he's not as red in this trial. I think Charlie Adelson's trial was a real sleeper trial. I don't think anyone expected the kind of attention it got, because I think people who were into following trials, there was a little bit of break. The only competing trial I think was near the end of it was wasn't that the eye drop Faesen trial? So there wasn't a whole lot of really exciting trials going on. So if people weren't following this case, they were starting to follow Charlie's trial. And by the time Jeffrey Lacasse gets on the stand there, he's really red. And whoever asked me in the chat, yes, I think that the bullet bourbon was put on there. I think the whole invitation was manufactured by someone. So either that's not the real invitation and it was manufactured by someone with a little, so in the actual invitation, and next time I'll be a little bit better prepared and have a picture of it, or the place where Deep Dive True Crime shows it. It's at the top and it's like a little package. And in the little package at the top, it says, please bring bullet bourbon or another kind of spirit. And I think yeah, it has the right address. It has the right day. It has the right people. But the judge was right not to let it into evidence. It can't be verified. It's a PDF. I don't know I wonder what Georgia Kappelman thinks of it and the whole prosecution team. It's odd. It's very odd.
About Catherine McBanois, did you ever have an occasion to meet her?
Yeah, I went to dinner with her. I believe it was on March 11th when we went over there to meet Charlie.
Okay, so who was present at that meal on March 11th? And that's 2014?
That's correct. It was myself, Wendi Adelson, Charlie, and Katie.
Charles Adelson
Charles
and
Adelson and
Catherine
Catherine McBanois.
Thank you. What about Sigfredo Garcia? Did you ever have an occasion to meet him?
I did not. I've never met him.
Was Ms. Adelson very close to her parents and her brother Charlie?
Extremely close.
I want to ask you about June 4th, 2014. Do you recall a event that occurred that day that was unusual?
Yeah, I remember a couple of unusual occurrences on June 4th.
Could you tell us about that, please?
Yeah, I had met Ms. Adelson at the Red Eye Coffee Shop in Midtown for a coffee about 1 or 2 o'clock in the afternoon. We were going to talk about our relationship a little bit. And she canceled a trip we had planned to California to visit my parents, which was scheduled for July 11th to 17th.
All right. And was she acting strangely that night?
Yeah, that night, she was a nervous wreck to the point, I couldn't put my finger on why at the time, to the point where she lived kind of way up Centerville where there's no convenience stores or anything close. And I actually took about 35 minutes and drove to a convenience store to get her Pepto-Bismol because she was such a nervous wreck and had a real nervous stomach that evening.
And did she ever tell you what the problem was?
No, she's very non-specific about it.
Were you?
Yeah, but we know that she told Jeffrey Lacasse that her brother Charlie at one point looked into hiring a hitman, and they could only bring that in as evidence by asking Wendy about it, having her deny it, and then bringing Jeffrey Lacasse back as a rebuttal witness. But can you imagine if Jeffrey Lacasse took the trip as planned? And he would have been screaming about in the police station, screaming about all the weird things that happened. And he really would have looked like a conspiracy theorist. If you didn't know more about this family, what do you mean? Why would she tell you that? And like I explained last episode, the reason why I think is that she got great pleasure from the idea that Jeffrey Lacasse was going to be the suspect. And it would have been her word against Jeffrey Lacasse. And everyone knows how convincing she can be when she wants to be. Not in hindsight when we all know about the case, but if they were putting together the case in the beginning, she would be saying things like, he was really mad because I canceled this trip to see his parents. Right? Wasn't he going on a trip right around the first time in June too? So July 18th rolls around. He was just supposed to be headed right by. And she loves dancing along the edge like that. Getting away with it, getting over. And having people that she finds pathetic take the take the blame for stuff she's done. It gives her a thrill. And I think that's why she drove by the crime scene. Just because A, she couldn't help herself. But B, she wanted everyone to know that she did this. And look at her testimony when she says, I will never be charged for this crime. I will never be arrested, excuse me. Never be arrested for Dan Markel's murder on the stand. She's under immunity. She gets a huge grin on her face. They love getting over this family, and they get so mad when people don't accept their lies and accept their strategies, because this is a family that schemes. They love to scheme and set up strategies, and they think that their code words, which are really more like words with double meanings, talking about, of course, Donna and Charlie, that we're all too dumb to figure out what they're talking about.
You aware during the course of your relationship with Ms. Adelson about her efforts to relocate to South Florida with the children?
I certainly was.
All right. And were you in her life when she learned that the court was not going to permit her to take the
No, our
children
first
to
date
South
was
Florida?
September 27th, 2013. So that was a topic of conversation on our first couple of dates, but it was in the past when we discussed it.
All right. And was Ms. Adelson happy about the fact that she was not able to relocate?
No, she was quite bitter about it, actually. It was, as I said, a topic that came up, that tone came up on those first two dates.
All right. Did she make any statements to you in reference to her brother considering options to take care of this problem with her not being able to relocate?
Yes, she did.
Okay.
And there's an interesting part of, they cut it out,
All right, Mr. Lacasse.
of Jeffrey Lacasse's police questioning. He says, this is going to be made public. Can we talk off the record? And they say, well, we can talk somewhat off the record, but not all. And he goes, I know what happens. I know what happens with tapes like this. It's going to be made public. Like, he saw where this was going, that this was going to be a very big case. And his interrogation is now, I think, one of the more interesting things about the whole case. It's not just that he put it together. And I understand the people that are critical of Jeffrey Lacasse and think, had I been told that, had I met Charlie and had Wendy told me that her brother looked into hiring a hitman, considering how dangerous Jeffrey Lacasse considered Charlie was, that he should have gone to the police right away. I think there can be an argument made that they couldn't do much with that. It was a year ago. He didn't have much more to prove that anything was being planned. Maybe it would have put Wendy in the spotlight right away. But who knows? It could have gotten lost. Look at the people who raised the red flag about, well, I guess that's not, I was going to say another case, another trial that I attended. But a lot of times the red flag is raised and it's ignored. So I find it a little, I'm not of that thinking that Jeffrey Lacasse, you have to get in his mindset. He's crazy in love. He thinks that he's found the woman he's going to spend the rest of his life with. That's how I see it. He's crazy in love with her. And I think it's also a little bit of a project for her. According to Jeffrey Lacasse, he increasingly saw how, at least in the beginning, he was crazy in love and thought it was going to go that direction. But he increasingly saw how unstable she was. And beyond this facade of perfection was a lot of upset and huge lack of empathy. even so, I mean, to understand his relationship with Wendy, he went into therapy himself, and it was his therapist that rightfully, in my opinion, suggested that Wendy is a psychopath. And when he questioned Wendy about it, she says, I don't know if I'm a psychopath or not, which I think she knows, very aware that she is a psychopath. Psychopaths tend to be aware of what they are, that there's something terribly missing with them, with themselves. And they look to emulate normal behavior all the time. But I don't feel anything about any of this. I mean, that would just make your blood run cold. Can you imagine?
When we broke, we were talking about statements made to you by Wendi Adelson about her brother considering options to take care of her relocation problem. What, if any, statements did she tell you to that effect?
Yes, ma'am. On July 13th, 2014, Wendy and I were speaking, and she asked me if she could share something with me confidentially. I told her sure. She mentioned, or she said, that Charlie had explored all options to take care of the problem, and that he had looked into having Professor Markel killed. It would cost about $15,000. I later talked to investigator Eisen and said that could have been $50,000. They sound an awful lot alike.
Okay.
So another benefit to letting Jeffrey Lacasse know that Charlie looked into hiring hitmen is also making Jeffrey Lacasse afraid of this family, afraid of speaking up, afraid of telling what he knew. Had he been a weaker guy, a more fearful person, he had a right to be afraid of the Adelson family, be afraid of telling what he knew. So had he not made it as suspect number one, and who knows how deep this plan was the plan to get him on trial and convicted, or was the plan just to have him be a suspect long enough for them to get down to Miami and for the lawyer to make that call? I'm here. My clients are the Adelsons. Everyone but the oldest brother, who lives a very fruitful life of serving others as a doctor in upstate New York and has a strong sense of morality, miraculously, how that happened in this family. The antisocial personality genes must have skipped him. But was that the plan? Just to have him be the suspect for long enough? Or were they really fantasizing? And I think that was really the fantasy. And this family always thinks the best is going to happen to them, of getting Jeffrey Lacasse wrongfully convicted for this crime. I can't see it going that far, but I think that they at least had that fantasy. How committed they were to it, who knows?
Okay, so you're not sure if she said 15 or 50.
That's right, but I'm confident she made that statement. I just can't remember the exact dollar amount. And she did state that was during the relocation battle the previous summer is when that had taken place.
All right. And the day that she made the statement to you was July 13th of 2014.
Yes, ma'am.
Did Mrs. Adelson tell you anything about the celebration dinner? Anything about a celebration dinner?
Yes.
Could you tell us about that, please?
Yes. A couple weeks after Professor Markel was murdered, we spoke on the phone, and she had mentioned that her and Charlie had gone to these are her words. She said, Charlie and I went to what he described as a celebration dinner.
All right. And that was the dinner where she vomited?
That's right. That's correct.
And are you aware, Mr. Lacasse, that Ms. Adelson suggested you as a possible suspect in this homicide?
Yes, I am.
And where were you when Dan Markel was murdered?
I was on the road to Tennessee. I originally had a trip planned for 11 a.m. on Friday the 18th. and I had at the last moment changed my trip to Thursday night.
So you left early.
I left early without telling anyone other than the people at the destination. Miss Adelson was the only person I had told in Tallahassee about the time that I was leaving, which was 11 a.m. on the 18th. I had informed her of that in around June 10th.
All right, so originally it was going to be July 18th at 11 a.m. would be your departure.
Yes, ma'am.
And would you be flying or driving?
I was driving.
All right, and it changed to Thursday night, so you left the night before and were in Tennessee at the time of the homicide?
That's correct.
No further questions.
Cross.
Still morning. Good morning, sir. How are you?
Good morning.
Pronounce your last name for me again.
Lacasse.
Lacasse. Okay. Just want to make sure I got it right. Mr. Lacasse. So Wendi Adelson knew you were leaving. Well, you told her you were leaving Friday morning.
Friday morning at 11, we had discussed it because we had some plans that got canceled, so we had discussed it in some detail, actually.
And your plan was to leave Tallahassee and to drive northbound.
Thomasville Road, eastbound, yes, sir.
Sure. Let me rephrase that. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
So your plan was to travel north of Tallahassee to Tennessee, correct?
That's correct.
And you told Wendy that, hey, listen, I'm going on this trip and I'm leaving Friday morning around 11 a.m., correct?
That's correct.
And do you recall what time the actual shooting took place?
I believe it was right around 11 a.m.
The same exact time that you'd be leaving the area?
That's correct.
And although it was for a business trip, if people didn't know what your plans were, would you agree with me that it may look like you're leaving the scene if you're traveling outside of the jurisdiction?
That's what I was concerned about, that if I had taken my trip at the scheduled time, I would have looked like I was fleeing, because I would have been driving, I would have taken Capitol Circle to Thomasville and been very close to Professor Markel's house, actually.
I mean, it's so crazy how they're making such a good case. I guess the case is that Sigfredo Garcia, or this is his lawyer? Is that my understanding? Is that right? I mean, how does that make Sigfredo Garcia look better? I don't know. Let's find out where he's going. It's been a long time since I've watched this one.
And when did you find out that Miss Adelson, Wendi Adelson, had suggested that you may be involved in this?
I suspected it from the police interrogations, but they didn't explicitly say that. Eventually, I was able to view her interrogation video.
And by her, you mean Wendi Adelson?
Yes, sir.
And by interrogation video, you mean interview, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Because as you're aware, she has not been charged in this case, correct?
I'm aware of that. Yes, sir.
And obviously you haven't either.
Right.
Right. You've been cleared by law enforcement?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, let's.
Okay, so they're going to make the argument that Wendy did this all alone without Charlie's help. And Katie and Sigfredo weren't in it. I'm working on a episode about Katie. There's some really interesting things. Not only do we know from a argument filed by the state, by Georgia Kappelman, that she wanted how Katie's lawyers and Sigfredo's lawyers were being paid for, that they were going to compromise her case. And I think that the fact that they were being paid for it by the Adelsons and some evidence that they were, it was very, 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 what you call not overwhelming evidence. Okay. But that obviously got turned down. But the way I see it is that the Adelsons because Katie testified that her parents were paying, and it seems like her parents didn't have the means to pay for 2 lawyers. And Sigfredo Garcia, if you've listened to Katie's conversations with Charlie or her testimony, Sigfredo Garcia never had 2 nickels to rub together. So how is he paying for a private lawyer? So I believe that the Adelsons, through some means, paid, I don't know if they sent it directly to the lawyer, because as Donna says, the lawyers, they cannot talk. But do they have to ask a lawyer this, since they aren't really the client, do they have privilege? I guess so, because it's Katie's case, and anything related to Katie's case, the lawyers couldn't say, right, how they were being paid. So I guess it could go that way, but no way was her parents paying for it. But I was wondering if the Adelsons were sending it to her parents, the money, to make it look like it was coming from them. Sigfredo, I have no idea. But there's a lot of really interesting things around money and the Adelsons and how much they've paid to cover all these defendants, excuse me.
Let's talk about your relationship with Wendi Adelson. You started dating her. Give me a time period.
September 27th, 2013 was our first date.
And how long would you say that your relationship with her lasted?
Well, there's different phases of it. In that fall semester, we weren't exclusive. It was more casual. It became more serious late February, early March. So as far as a serious, I'm your boyfriend, you're my girlfriend sort of thing, just March through July.
Okay. So you started casually dating in September of 2013, and it got more serious at the beginning of 2014, correct?
That's right.
Okay.
That's right.
And how did you meet Miss Adelson? How did you guys first have a date?
Yeah, through mutual friends.
Okay, so it wasn't like on a social media dating app or anything else?
No.
Okay. Were you aware if Miss Adelson was participating in online dating?
I think I knew that she had dated online in the past. I did not know the time frame.
One of your concerns, okay, so once you guys became exclusive, and by exclusive, I mean you called her your
I knew we were dating. I didn't know that I was actually chosen to be a patsy for the murder plot her family had worked out to kill her ex-husband. I didn't know that at that time. Questions I'll never be asked on the stand by Jeffrey Lacasse. That's his memoir.
Your girlfriend, and she called you her boyfriend, is that fair?
That's correct. And I was involved with the kids at that point and things like that.
And it got to the point where she introduced you to her family, right?
That's right.
And you indicated that there was a dinner where you met Charlie Adelson?
That's right.
Kind of a good-looking guy, right?
Sure.
Right. Works out?
Yes.
When you went...
What is this obsession in these trials about Charlie Adelson being good looking? What is this about? I've asked the audience because I may not be, I like some unconventional looking men. I may not be the arbiter of good looking when it comes to men, but no one says he's good looking. What is this obsession with asking witnesses, whether it's Wendy or Jeffrey Lacasse, whether Charlie Adelson is good looking? Is that something Donna demanded of these lawyers since she was paying? You have to ask. He's very good looking. He's very well spoken, very believable, intelligent young man. Everyone else is stupid. They're all stupid, right? Is that what happened? What is going on with this obsession with Charlie's looks in these trials?
Went on, when you had your double date, where it was you, Wendi Adelson, Charlie, and Miss Magbanua, did you see what kind of car Mr. Adelson pulled in?
I don't recall seeing his car in the parking lot. We then went to his house, so I saw his garage and got a look at some of the vehicles he owned, but not that at dinner.
What kind of vehicles does he have?
Ferrari is the one that stood out to me.
Do you remember the color of the Ferrari?
I don't.
Did you make any comments to Wendy about the?
Really, Jeffrey Lacasse? Really, it wasn't his police car, his Blues Brothers like car that Wendy says he owned? Because that's what stuck out to her. It's the Ferrari, because she doesn't even know what a Ferrari looks like. So silly.
Ferrari?
Well, Wendy used to talk about Charlie having a Ferrari. I mean, that was, she would say, my brother's a character. He has a Ferrari. He has an undercover cop car. He has, I think, a nice Benz in addition or some luxury car.
So she knew what a Ferrari was, right?
Sure. Well, sure.
So it's not like she didn't say he's got a Porsche and you saw a Ferrari, right?
No, it was a Ferrari. And I actually remember discussing the cost of maintenance with Charlie. There were some downsides to having a Ferrari.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
It's tough. Tough. So pretty extensive car collection, right?
He had multiple cars. Yeah. I don't know exactly how many.
And did you learn what he did for a living?
Yeah, I knew he was a periodontist from speaking with Wendy.
And was that the only night you had direct contact with Mr. Adelson, Charlie Adelson?
That's the only contact I ever had with him that night.
Did he appear to have, did he appear to be intelligent?
He had, that's a difficult question. I just met him the one night.
I'll withdraw that. Let me ask a more important question. Was he?
Yeah, he's having trouble answering that. I used to have a teacher who said, confusion is when you have a question you don't want. I would say confusion in this case is when, I think Jeffrey Lacasse's confusion comes from not wanting to answer that question. I don't think intelligence is what stuck out about Charlie with all his stories of going to South America to have relations with women who weren't, or girls under 18, let's put it like that. And all the rest of the stories about committing acts that would be considered felonies on women who embarrass you, those kind of things, that kind of took precedence over his intelligence. But what I'm so struck by is how unintelligent he comes off in these jailhouse calls. Obsessive. He gets an A for obsessiveness. He can do the same talking points over and over again, round and round and round, and you really get an idea of how he built his defense. By practicing, and thinking of all the little pitfalls with Rashbaum. I'm sure they play acted. Rashbaum took Georgia Kappelman's role for Cross, and they did all sorts of different crosses and all sorts of different directs and really had him practice it. But I'm sure when Rashbaum wasn't there, there was Charlie Adelson in his jail cell going over and over again all the evidence, all the audio tapes in his head, what days they were, what would be an alternate explanation. I was just listening to him talk about Nazi stuff, being crazy people, and not that he wanted to not eliminate this guy off the face of the earth, and but that he was going to go crazy on him. Crazy on, right? That's a little heart. Yeah, that's what he was trying to get over on the court. And he's mad because the Tallahassee jury wisely didn't buy his ridiculous answers. Can't get over it.
Was he socialized? Was he drinking that night?
I don't recall if he was drinking. He was holding forth. He was talking a lot. He was confident. That was my impression of him.
He was talking a lot?
Yes.
Did you ever see him go to the bathroom?
I don't recall.
Did you ever see him, was he perspiring more than a normal person would during dinner?
This is 5 years ago. I don't remember.
So I guess what he's asking is, did he go to the bathroom? But we do know that Josh Dubin, the jury, consultant in Charlie Adelson's trial, the well-paid jury consultant, former Innocence Project ambassador. I don't know if he still has that role, but certainly he's very enmeshed in that group. He had as his assistant, according to Sonny, was going to the bathroom all the time. So sweating, going to the bathroom. I think they're trying to set up. Did Lacasse notice that he had some kind of issues with substances? Yeah.
We were outside and it was, not cool at that time of year, but yeah.
Okay, so you're outside in like an open area restaurant?
Yeah, we were at the Yardbird on the patio.
Okay, the Yardbird in South Beach?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Did you witness Charlie Adelson doing cocaine that night?
I did not. Did not.
So this is a guy who's in South Beach, right? Drives a Ferrari, right?
Yes.
What had Wendy previously described him as having a lot of girlfriends?
Sure.
Handsome guy, probably could get attention of women.
I would presume so.
But your only face-to-face meeting was that dinner, correct?
Well, that dinner, and then we went back to his house and hung out in his hot tub for a little while, but that was it.
And during that time that you went to his house to hang up in the hot tub, did you see him ever go to the bathroom, or was he ever outside of your personal space?
Yeah, I think all of us were in and out of that hot tub at various points because we were sitting there a little while.
At any point did Charlie Adelson? Now, look, you're a law professor, correct?
Professor of social work, actually.
Correct. Okay. I'm sorry. You're a professor at the university, correct? I apologize, not law professor.
Yeah.
You're an educated person, correct?
Sure.
You'll agree with me that a layperson wouldn't solicit you to commit a murder, correct?
Objection. Argumentative.
Sustained.
I'll re-ask this. Did Charlie Adelson ask you to kill Dan Markel?
Did Charlie ask me to
Did he
kill him?
ask you?
No.
Of course not. And
Mr.
That is a great look at that reaction. That's such a natural reaction. He's like, "You're really asking me that on the stand? You're really saying because he didn't ask me that he wouldn't ask anyone else? Because he didn't ask Wendy's current boyfriend to do it? That I can't have concerns about being the patsy? Because I never saw him go to the bathroom a whole lot, even though I don't know where he went. We were both in and out of the hot tub so much. Yeah, he did leave it, come and go at certain times. That didn't exactly fly for Sigfredo Garcia's lawyer there. That he wouldn't do that. Talk about grasping at straws for the defense here. Woo.
I apologize. I'll withdraw the, of course. And you'll agree with me that at no point did you give him any reason to believe that you would be someone that would do such a nefarious act, correct?
No.
Okay. When the prosecutor asked you about June 4th, 2014, you recall that?
Yes, sir.
And you said that you guys were at the Red Eye Coffee Shop, right?
That's correct.
And around what time was that?
I had a hair appointment at 2 or 3, so it was at 1 or 2.
And so in the early afternoon,
Could have been as early as 12:30, sir.
12:30.
Yeah.
Okay. So around 12:30 on June 4th, 2014, correct?
That's correct.
You indicated that she was and by she I mean Wendi Adelson, that she was acting unusual.
That's correct.
Would that be a fair assessment?
Yes.
Did you ask her what was wrong?
I did ask her what was wrong. It was very non-specific. That happened with Wendy quite a bit with it, where she was upset and there was not an exact name put to why.
Was she upset often?
Yes.
Would she get these kind of physical reactions often, that her stomach would hurt or that she would ask you to get her medicine?
I got to know her better in the spring, so I saw more of it than I would have in the fall. That was the only time I can recall that was not an average thing. I think it's why I remember it, because it was unusual.
And you said that you drove about 35 minutes?
So there's a really interesting part of Jeffrey Lacasse's police interview where he talks about Wendy looking sad or looking upset as if she was mourning something. And I thought, there's so much in Wendy that betrays absolute joy in Dan Markel's murder. Was she practicing being sad for her police interview? Was she practicing hysterically crying, fake hysterically crying, or crying on cue for her police interview? Because no one can say that wasn't a performance. Even she says to Sarah and Craig Isom, the victim's advocate and the detective, I'm sorry I'm not more entertaining. She's aware that she has to put on a performance. And they have to be captivated by it. And she offers up this idea that she's very understanding of being a suspect. She's very eager to give the receipts and her laptop and her car over for inspection, highlighting all the time that she's a mom, the Cheerios in the car seats, and just mom stuff. I drive a minivan. She likes to do that on the stand too. Remind everybody she's just an average mom. Could she have been practicing? Let me know what you think.
Minutes to get her medicine?
Yeah, could have been 25, 35 minutes, but where she lived was not convenient to run to the store. So it was a discussion like, do we want to do that? It's all the way down there. And she was so nervous. I thought, no, I'm going. So
Did she go with you?
no, she did not. She had the kids that night. So she stayed with the children.
Did she make any kind of doctor's appointments shortly thereafter? To your knowledge?
Not to my knowledge.
Now, you indicated that you guys became boyfriend and girlfriend at the beginning portion of 2014. Is that a correct statement, sir?
Yes, sir.
And when would you tell the members of this jury that your relationship with her ended?
Well, that's a little complicated. On July 14th, we went on a date. And when I got home, she had sent me an email saying, I need a week to think. Please don't contact me for the next week. And so that was the Monday before Professor Markel was killed. And then we didn't talk for maybe 10 or 12 days after the murder. So I assumed it was internally, I assumed it was over. That night when you get an email like that, you're probably figuring it's over. But in subsequent phone calls, she acted as if it was still a slightly open issue. And we closed that down by phone calls that, obviously we're going to move forward and move on here.
Did you ever?
Right, because what better way to keep someone crazy about you than kind of hinting that it's not over, might not be over. Because you can see how heartbroken Jeffrey Lacasse was in the beginning of his police interview. And Wendy had done a really good job, like she did with so many of the people close to her. Not that Jeffrey Lacasse was really close to her. And I don't even know if anyone was close to her, I really mean devoted to her, that they were fully on board with the idea that Dan Markel was the abuser and Wendy was the long-suffering ex-wife, just trying to handle him, get through this terrible, horrible divorce, of which she took no part in how contentious it was. It was absolutely not her fault.
Question her loyalty to you in your relationship with her?
With regularity, yes.
And when you say with regularity, when did you first become suspicious? No, let me ask this question first. You were concerned that she was seeing other men, right?
I was.
Okay. And when did you first start getting this concern?
Probably March, April timeframe, I started to wonder. So not too long after we became a couple, I guess what I was wondering is, have we really become a couple, or is she still doing what she was doing before? That was
So
kind of
was it like, did you find like text messages or direct messages on social media that made you kind of go, what's going on here?
No, I didn't see any text messages or anything on social media. Her behavior was just erratic. She would disappear. She would get home very late at night. So there were signs like that.
Would you talk to her about it?
I tried to.
Okay. So let me ask it this way.
Yeah.
Did she understand that you were concerned about her being loyal to you, or your relationship being a monogamous one?
To be completely honest, I think we kind of pussyfooted around that until we had that big fight at the end of June. That's what that argument was about.
Let's talk about that big fight.
Yeah, sure.
Why don't you walk the members of the jury through what happened?
Yeah, I had taken Wendy to Gainesville with me. I was teaching in the off-campus program at UF for the weekend, so I took her with me.
I'm sorry, was it just you and her, or did she bring the kids?
No, it's just me and her.
So like a romantic getaway to Gainesville?
Well, work/pleasure. I teach during the day. She works in a coffee shop. We have dinner with friends at night, that kind of stuff. You know, It's a nice area down
Sounds
there.
nice.
Yeah, it was nice. And weekend started off fine. The Saturday night, we sort of got into it over this stuff. I confronted her about the fact that I suspected that she had been seeing other men.
Okay, so let's talk about that.
Yeah.
So you're at dinner?
We were actually up in the hotel room. The night was basically over. It was pretty late. It was 9 or 10 o'clock at night when this discussion happened.
Okay. And had she had any alcoholic beverages at that point?
We both had, but I think just 1 or 2 glasses of wine a couple hours earlier.
Just socially with dinner, maybe?
Yeah, that was
Okay.
There was no more drinking than that.
And did you say, listen, I think this, that, or the other? Did you have any specifics, or were you just giving a vague, I'm concerned about where this relationship is?
The latter. I was pretty specific. I told her I was very concerned. I was particularly concerned because the way she had framed our relationship was, you're not just becoming my boyfriend. I have children. I'm a mother. It's like I was auditioning for the job of husband and father is actually sort of how it felt in retrospect. So I bonded with the kids pretty tightly. And as you can imagine, in a relationship, that kind of discussion gets more complicated when you're serious and there's kids. And she had been talking about me moving in. She had told me not to buy a house. She had told me not to buy a Jeep, that I needed to buy a vehicle that 2 car seats could fit in. So
So it sounds like you guys were heading down that path.
yeah, hence why I raised the issue, because I had some intuitions everything wasn't quite right. Her behavior had been a little erratic, and I was worried about moving in and ending up in a really bad situation, actually.
So would it be fair to say that she was saying the wrong things, but her actions were speaking louder than her words?
That's not a bad summary. I was getting 2 very different messages based on behavior or what she was speaking to me, what she was saying.
Did that argument or that discussion?
A little like Wendy's testimony, right? So she's saying these things that are totally incongruent in this like odd way. I mean, I don't know. Maybe it's all odd with her testimony. The doll eyes are odd. The head to the side is odd. The sort of Bambi deer lost in the headlights look is odd. But there are some women who look at Wendy's testimony or hear about her situation and initially want to really identify with her. It's interesting. But I find it all really odd. Especially when she's asked whether she drove by the crime scene, and an innocent person, there's where she takes a wrong turn, said, yes, I did. I was doing this. I was on my way to buy alcohol, and I can't believe, and I thought a tree was down, She'd tell you right off, but instead she's like, well, I was driving. No, I didn't drive by the crime scene. I just drove up to the tape. Or she becomes a lawyer. So she couldn't drive by the crime scene because there was tape up. So she didn't drive by it. She drove up to it. I'd love to know what you think the difference is in that. And I'd love to hear a jury have Jeffrey Lacasse explain how she called, they had broken up after going to yoga and she called them back. She wanted to know all about this trip. When's the last time you broke up with someone and you wanted to know all about what they were doing the next day?
Did you feel it the next morning?
What do you mean by feel it, sir?
Was she acting any different the following morning?
Oh, the next day was probably the most awkward car ride I've ever had in my life. We rode from Gainesville to Tallahassee. She was crying. I was very upset. It was a very awkward 3-hour drive.
It's a 3-hour drive?
Three or four, however long it is to.
Okay, from Gainesville to Tallahassee, however long that was.
Yeah, exactly. Sorry.
And this was in June, you said June 20?
That would have been June 29th. That's the Sunday, the last Sunday in June.
2 weeks later, on July 13th, Wendy tells you, or Wendy has this discussion with you that the prosecutor elicited, right?
Yes.
From June 29th to July 13th, would you say your relationship with Wendy after that awkward, that long 2 or 3 hour, 4 hour, however long it is, from Gainesville to Tallahassee, emotional car ride, right?
Yes.
She's crying,
Yes.
upset.
Yes.
And I would assume, well, let me strike this. Did you believe that she was upset? Because like I said, she was saying all the right things, but she wasn't acting like she was talking.
It's very complicated, and she was all over the place, to be frank. And that at one point she was confessing. At one point she was saying, I never did that. She was saying she couldn't remember some things I wanted to talk about, which was frustrating. So go ahead. I'm sorry.
No worries. You said she was confessing. Was she admitting to potential talking to other men?
More than talking the night before when we were having the argument, but it was.
What was she saying?
It was a heated discussion, so I don't remember every word of it. But at points, she kind of let it slip out that my concerns were well founded.
Okay.
And then 5 minutes later, she would say the opposite. And when I've had to explain the story in the past, I've had to say it doesn't sound like it makes sense because she was just all over the place. She was hysterical. Really.
Okay. So
Kind of like she told Jeffrey Lacasse that Charlie looked into hiring a hitman the year before, then denied it. Kind of like how she blamed Charlie, excuse me, little Freudian slip there. She blamed Jeffrey Lacasse for being overly jealous and not trusting her, and that's why she had to end the relationship and ended in such an odd way. I'd love to hear from anyone else who dated Wendy for any period of time, whether she broke up in that way. She gave it a week. Wendy seems to make pretty clear decisions about what she wants. For example, when she moved out of the house when Dan Markel was in New York, she left the divorce papers and took everything. If you were unsure, you would leave some things. You wouldn't have the divorce papers ready. You would just take off, right? And why do it while Dan Markel is in New York? For maximum impact, for maximum to hurt him the most. And how frustrating is this gaslighting she's doing of Jeffrey Lacasse must be. I just told you I cheated on you. And now, how could you accuse me? How could you not trust me? I can't be with someone who can't trust me. It's the most madness making tactic. And what better way to get Jeffrey Lacasse in a state of absolute confusion? I don't know if confusion's the right word. Obsession. What went wrong? Why was she telling me that she wanted me to get this kind of car and she wanted the kids to call daddy and then to only break up with me? What was going on? What was she upset about? What was she mourning? She wanted Jeffrey Lacasse to know she did this. And he's the sucker. Try to talk to the police and see who they believe. The law professor or the jealous ex-boyfriend.
So would it be fair to say at some point she admits to talking to other dudes, I apologize, to talking to other men, and then shortly thereafter denies what she just confessed to?
Well, then I repeat as needed on the car ride back. She was like, I never did any of that stuff. I don't know what you're talking about, which was kind of crazy making for me because she had confessed to some of it the night before.
Okay. So from June 29th till July 13th, would you say you were fixing the relationship at that point? Was it getting better or was it getting worse?
It's hard to tell because on the 29th, I left her house and I didn't see her again until July 13th. She went to South Florida for those 2 weeks.
Did you guys talk on the phone?
We talked on the phone once in a while. We did some video chats. I talked to the kids via video chat and things like that. But it was very up in the air where the relationship was going to go. I would get a mixture of messages, verbally and by text.
Would you agree with me that your level of contact with her between June 29th and July 14th was less than it was before?
Oh, it was minimal. It was minimal. Days and days would go by at points without us talking on the phone at least. I may get the random text or something, but we weren't talking a lot.
And then on July 13th, Wendy, in essence, tells you that her brother, Charlie, had looked into hiring a hitman to kill Dan Markel.
In 2013, yes, sir.
In 2013?
Yes.
What was your reaction to this?
It was in the context of a relationship discussion. It kind of just blurted out. When he has a habit of blurting things out, they're kind of tangential or whatever. And so I didn't know what to make.
So Wendy, I would argue Wendy's mind is not so disorganized that she brings in something random in the context of the relationship. The reason she's having the relationship, I would argue, with Jeffrey Lacasse is intimately connected to Charlie hiring a hitman. So of course she would bring it up in the context of the relationship discussion. She knows Jeffrey Lacasse is, if he should be a suspect, said, wait, she also wants to know that she planned, this was the plan all along, right? He's got to figure that out. That's her way of letting him know, giving him a preview of things to come. Just a little preview. So that the impact, she was going for maximum impact all around with Dan Markel, with the way that he was murdered. Such a terrifying public way. She wanted everyone to know that she could be involved in this and then just deny it. And if you didn't deny it, you would be the horrible person for not believing her. And there's still people out there that think the Adelson family would plan this without her knowing. And without her okay, and that they would know all these intimate details of Dan's schedule just from being close with Wendy, and they were perfectly okay with having this be a gift. Remember, this family thought it was a gift that Wendy would be totally, that she might not want, that it might just be a bum gift. Whoops, sorry, a little too late now. Oh, July 19th, we find out. 2014, we find out Wendy didn't want this. Oh, too bad. Yeah. Oh, guys. Charlie, Donna. I'm Harvey. What were we all thinking? How could we all be so stupid? Right? This was a really bad gift. Kind of reminds me of the time that we got Wendy. I don't know what. I don't even know what you would get her in her generation, but I don't know. The Vanilla Ice record, when she really wanted to say something else, they put it akin to that. Was that what that's what they were all willing to accept? This bum gift that costs probably, I mean, now it's costing them millions. I mean, what are the prices? I would love to hear an estimate on what Sigfredo Garcia's lawyer cost, what Katie's 2 lawyers, 2 trials cost, and Charlie's defense cost, and what Donna's defense cost, and what they paid before that, and not counting the people who ripped them off, who took $50,000 and never did anything, just ripped them off. It's got to be in the multi-millions now that they've spent or will spend on this. And you know how much money is important to them.
Make of it, my stomach kind of flipped. It was like a chilling statement. And then we kind of ended up talking about the relationship again. And so I didn't give it a lot of thought at the time. It was just like a crazy thing that someone would say, you know?
Okay. Very crazy thing.
Yeah.
But let me ask you this. Did you take that statement as a threat to you? That, and let me kind of clarify this. She indicated that because of her bad relationship with Mr. Markel, correct? And you'll agree with me that they had a bad relationship, correct?
That's how she characterized it.
You'll agree with me that she said, based on a bad relationship, that her brother had looked into hiring somebody to kill him, correct?
Well, that was specifically about the relocation, is
Okay.
what she said in that statement. I know they had bad blood otherwise for other reasons, certainly, but that was specifically tied to the relocation battle being lost. That was what prompted Charlie to look into it, according to her statement.
This conversation that you had on July 13th, where was it?
It was in her house on Aqua Ridge.
Was anybody else around when she made the statement?
No, sir.
Did you contact any of your friends after this conversation and discuss the fact that Wendi Adelson had indicated that her brother had looked to hire a hitman?
In what time frame?
Okay, so on July 13th, when the conversation's over, do you stay there that night?
No,
You left.
we ended with me telling Wendy, if you this isn't going to work for you, you can text me and we can just break up. I don't want a big thing, like confrontation. And I left for the night. I did not stay.
Do you have like a family member or a best friend that you talk to about personal issues?
I have several, sure.
Okay. Did you call or contact any of them?
All right. I just want to take a little bit of a break and acknowledge. Thank you, Matt Schneider, for the super sticker. Appreciate it. And thank you, Dr. Zapp, for the very generous super sticker. Thank you both, Matt, Dr. Zapp. One of the best monikers, certainly, out there in this case. So if you're not familiar, Donna's lawyer could not get the Dr. Zapp in the Leon County Jail. It was Dr. Sapp, which you think he's a sap, would describe someone like what they think of Jeffrey Lacasse. He's a sap, sort of sentimental, foolish person that she'd remember it. But instead, she said Dr. Zapp like 1,000 times. and just start like refer to him as Dr. Zap. It's just kind of amazing. But none of these people are important to Donna's lawyer. She just needs to prove that that the Leon County Jail has violated Donna's rights. And as we know, someone put in the comments, I don't know this, I haven't looked into it, but that the head of the jail, I guess, what is he called? He has a special name. I'm sorry, I can't remember it, but he testified in Donna's hearing that he won some kind of award from the Innocence Project. So what he did for that, or why they honed in on him, you would think you would have to be doing something that would be defendant friendly or the accused friendly if they were just in jail and hadn't gone to trial yet. So I don't think it's a place that's looking to violate if they're winning those kind of awards. Not that I put a lot of stock in that kind of word, but you would think that they were doing something that benefits the people who are in jail there. And like I said, when I looked at their material, they had 1 million programs. Beekeeping was one of them. How many jails have a beekeeping program or having their inmates keeping bees? Looked pretty up to date with all the latest groups, 50 million different kinds of groups. And of course, you can get your GED and educational programs there. But I'd have to talk to someone who's been in the Leon County Jail recently to know. Of course, that's just their marketing materials. But even that, on that level, it's certainly far and above what most jails offer. And it's a big, big complex. So kind of interesting. Okay, I'm just going to go back to this. What are we at? Yeah, we're getting kind of close to being on for an extremely long time. I hope you're not bored, but try to finish this up. It's interesting. It's interesting that he could get in that comment about what Wendy said to him, Charlie hiring a hitman. I wonder why it wasn't hearsay here. I would assume because it relates specifically. I don't know. Would it have some relation to Sigfredo Garcia, the defendant? But wouldn't it still be? So I don't know. I don't really understand why it was allowed in this trial and not Charlie's trial. Probably because Charlie was the defendant, right? And it was something about him, I would think. I don't know. This is why these are the kind of questions a lawyer definitely could answer.
On the way back to discuss what had transpired about, and I'm not talking about the breakup.
Yeah.
Okay? I'm sorry. I am talking about the breakup.
Yeah.
Okay. Did you call your friends and go, hey, listen, it ended with me and Wendy?
It's summertime, and at FSU, a lot of these people were out of town. Some of them were even overseas, so there was less contact than there ordinarily would have been. But I'm sure I discussed the fact, well, not that night because it was so late. What I remember is the next day when I get this email saying, don't contact me for a week, I certainly shared that with friends because I found it really frustrating and surprising and thought it was weird.
Did you share with any of your friends the comment that Wendi Adelson made to you with regards to her brother and the murder for hire?
Yeah, I'm sure I did. I just couldn't tell you who or when I did that, but certainly after the murder occurred, certainly I shared that with people. I also shared it with the police the first day they brought me in.
Right. So you were interviewed by law enforcement in this case, correct?
Yes, sir.
During your interview with law enforcement, did you mention this statement?
I did.
Okay. Did you tell it was Detective Eisen that interviewed you?
It was him and Investigator Heyy.
Okay. Did you indicate to them who you had shared this information with?
I don't know that I was asked to.
Judge, it's not for the...
Overruled.
Can you restate the question?
No worries. So when you tell them what Wendy told you about her brother's murder for hire plot, did you say, yeah, listen, I spoke to my buddy, because the murder happened on the 18th, correct?
That's correct.
And so 4 days prior to that is when you got that breakup. Was it an email or a text message?
It was an email.
Okay, so you get a breakup email, and so you call your friends, which is normal, right? And you indicated just a few minutes ago that you probably mentioned the murder for hire to some of your friends, right?
At some point, I just don't know when.
Okay. What about, was that before or after your interview with law enforcement?
Was what before or after?
Your discussions with friends.
Well, after I had told it to the police, I certainly discussed it. I'm confident. I may have done it before as well. I don't recall that. But after I told the police that, I did share that with some people confidentially, yes.
I know a lot of people were angry at Jeffrey Lacasse for not keeping his notes, the notes that he made for himself before to bring into the police precinct when he was interviewed. But had he kept those notes, how much would he have looked like a jealous, vindictive boyfriend? How bad do you think that would be for him? I would think extremely bad and not helpful at all. I think we'd be hearing the argument, well, innocent people don't need to remember everything, but when you're building a case on someone, you need your, right? You need your notes in trial. I guess you could still make that argument. He needed his notes. He was building a case. But the fact that he got rid of them, I think supports the fact that he was working through a lot of really, I think, what would be very upsetting stuff. Who wants to find out that not only that they were dating a antisocial personality, but they were dating someone whose whole family, my opinion, took part, except Rob, the eldest, took part in a murder for hire plot to kill Wendy's ex-husband. Who wants to come to that conclusion? Who's eager to go through that? And then to have the knowledge that he had to be the closest person to Wendy right before all this happened. Who wants to do this, and who wants to testify in 3 trials?
Now, she told you, and by she, I'm referring to Wendi Adelson, during your July 13th conversation, that he had looked and the price was either 15 or 50,000, correct?
That's correct.
So it's either one or the other, correct?
Right.
And would it be fair to say, based on your testimony, that she said that that price was too high?
No, she didn't offer any further context or explanation. It was kind of a thing that was blurted out. And then literally 20 seconds later, she started talking about something else, and I can't recall what that was. I think it was the relationship stuff that I was very focused on.
So out of nowhere, she tells you Charlie was going to go look to hire a hitman. It was going to cost $15,000 or $50,000, and you don't go back to that.
I don't know that it was out of nowhere. I believe preceding that was a discussion that if anything ever happened to Danny, she would move to Miami. I think I've spoken to the investigator Ashman about that previously.
Right. So all these things are intimately connected. And she wants to put out the idea that the price was too high at $50,000. Really? We bogged them down, and then we found out that the Latin Kings would put us on a payment plan. But they only do that for, or do they only do that for extortion? They do it on spec. They murder on spec, and then they come back and they extort you. And that's unfortunately what happened. And anyone who can't see that is stupid and inbred, right? That's what Charlie said. The nerve of this family, the sense of entitlement, the sense of specialness, the insular quality, the cult-like quality. the back scratching and yet the total lack of loyalty from one family member to the other is amazing. So Donna can't wait to get these grandchildren to Miami, so much so that she's writing these huge emails to Wendy outlining all the different tactics Wendy can take and needs to take, demands. Donna demands that Wendy take. Yet, the minute she gets word from Daniel Rashbaum, that they may be thinking of indicting her. That's what's going on in Tallahassee. Got the word on the street. She's next, maybe Harvey. She's on a plane without the grandkids. Leave Charlie to rot in prison alone with no visits from her family, never to be seen again, out with a one-way ticket to Vietnam. And talking about it, and gets caught talking about it, about how she was looking for a non-extradition country to go to. And if Wendy were isolated and this were done without her knowledge, as Janine Driver, the quote-unquote body language expert, would like us to think, isn't it odd that Donna wants to discuss now with Wendy, have Wendy be her lawyer? A lawyer doesn't talk, right, for her? Wouldn't that be odd? Wouldn't that be out of the normal way of things if Wendy had no knowledge of this? Wouldn't they not want to discuss those things with Wendy? Wouldn't they not want her to be an accessory in their fleeing?
And listen, I have to ask Mr. Lacasse, at no point did you contact law enforcement after you heard of this threat so they could contact Mr. Markel to see if there's any need to protect him in any way, shape, or form?
I didn't.
Give me 1 second, Your Honor. Good night. Just a few more questions, sir.
Sure.
Would I be correct or incorrect in assuming or in saying that you were interested in having a monogamous relationship with Wendi Adelson?
I thought I had a monogamous relationship with
And you wanted to keep it, correct?
Depends when you're asking.
On July 13th, 2014?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
That's right. That's right.
I'm sorry to ask such personal questions. I know it's difficult. Did you think it's unusual? Well, let me ask this. At some point, did you ever see a picture of Dan Markel?
Sure.
Do you think that there's a resemblance between yourself and him?
Everybody always says that. When I was dating her, no one ever brought it up. I see it from the pictures. In real life, I was never told that while we were dating.
And as you indicated before, you're also a professor.
Why do you think that is? Do you think it's that Dan Markel had such a big personality and was so different in real life, and it's only in the pictures? Or is there some other reason? Because pretty much everybody, it's something that so many people in this community who follow this case talk about. And I would think that would have to be the reason. I can't, if there's another reason why, let me know.
Professor?
Yes, correct.
Do you feel wronged by Wendi Adelson?
Do I feel wronged?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
No further questions.
Yes, sir.
Okay, that's a good place to leave it for today. But you see why he's such a good witness? If Wendy were being asked those questions, she would say, "No, I don't feel wronged. We both mutually broke up." So avoid anything that makes you look bad, makes you look jealous, makes you look like any of the things that anybody's claiming. So a good, honest witness who's under oath and who respects that will answer that way. And I think should Wendy ever go to trial, I think he will be a crucial witness against her. And we'll be looking at what she did with other boyfriends. You know, she says in one of the police, I think it's in the police questioning. And, you know, I just want to show you really quick a picture of Jane McPherson. It's public from her social media. So this is the woman who was friends. This is from her Twitter. Friends with Jeffrey Lacasse. They were both in the same PhD program for social work. She said, my understanding from what she said in the police station is that she put them together, encouraged the relationship, and then said he's very jealous and was, the moment Wendy suggested it to her, she was very happy to suggest it to the police. And from my eye, it looks like they both were in total agreement that this was the number one suspect and need to be looked into right away. And funny, no pictures of Jeffrey Lacasse on Wendy's phone to show the detective. But that's where I'm going to end it for today. I'm very happy to be back. I will be back. What is it? Is it be back tomorrow with a whole new episode, hopefully on time at 6 p.m. Eastern. Please like this episode if you're watching on YouTube, subscribe to the channel, share this episode. If you're listening on podcast, please leave me a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. Follow me on social media. I'm on Twitter at Roberta Glass Pod. Join my Facebook group if you want to discuss this case, the Georgia Cappleman Appreciation Society, or if you just love Georgia Cappleman and the entire prosecution team in Tallahassee. Have a great night, everyone.